distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen. When the Academy of Cultural Diplomacy has launched the project of the new type of relationship between states and nations based on understanding the other, instead of relationship based on military and economic pressures, I have thought of which kind of laboratory is needed for such an approach to be tested in. And the answer came right away. It seemed obvious to me that this kind of relations that offer peace a chance in a globalized world can find an inspiring source in the old world of Levant. This happens not only because the Levant has been over millenniums the cradle of cultural diplomacy, but also because the Egyptians, Jewish, Assyrian, Babylonian, Phoenician, Greeks, Arab civilizations, the Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman empires have created, each one in their own way, an extended area for changes from goods to ideas and for cultural dialogue. The Balkans and the Southeastern Europe have been for a long while in contact with the areas like Northern Africa and the Near East, and the people living here own a vast experience in the intercultural dialogue. Dear friends, we travel today with similar airplanes. We are landing in airports alike. We lodged stops in hotels alike. We eat in the same fast food. We watch plasma TVs providing us the same news. Do you know now more about the world of old Levant? The first answer crossing my mind is, of course, we do, because we benefit of an overwhelming amount of information. But it is helping us to get along better with one another, or to know better who are we, where we come from, where we are heading to. I'm afraid not. The Eastern Mediterranean area has fascinated the Western Europe in the Renaissance, in the Romanticism until modernity, and the admiration for Levant of outstanding names of writers, artists, and musicians made them create prodigious visions and impressive literary, artistic, and musical works. The cultural connections between countries in the Balkans, the Middle East, and Northern Africa have continued in the second half of the 20th century, even during in Cold War, and the dictatorship regime through the creation of intellectual elites educated in Southeastern Europe universities and through mutual cultural exchange. Resuming this connection would represent a good opportunity for the diversity of our shared tradition to oppose the uniformizing tendencies of globalization overwhelmed by the pressure of profit and proposing a lifestyle closer to the human being aspirations. All these reasons made me consider the opportunity of the project dedicated to a culture of peace. We will engage the effort of researchers in humanistic sciences, scholars, theologians, writers, artists, musicians, architects, a culture of peace able to create a space of knowledge and understanding through cooperation and the mutual respect. Traveling in the first decade of the third millennium in the Middle East, North Africa, the Balkans, and the Caucasus, I was struck by the common origin of the historical and architectural vestiges, but especially by the numerous behavioral similarities derived from a common psychology that has roots in the old Levant. Why should we talk now about something that seems to belong only to a long gone, outdated past? Firstly, because the recent popular movement in Tunisia, Egypt, or Syria drew the world's attention towards the Mediterranean region and on the lack of the dialogue, an effective diplomacy in favor of mitigating the causes generating conflict. Secondly, because it seems risky the way economic crisis made many people to look to a Europe only like at a big trading company, assessed in terms of financial indicators. The constructions of European Union based on the ideals of democracy, law preeminence, and morality makes ridiculous some statements made by financial analysts or politicians talking about war as a possible consequence of the collapse of the common currency. These statements are not only irresponsible or foolish, but show even an ignorance of history. I cite the temptation, especially of those who have caused the crisis, to forget that the European Union is primarily a civilization model. The roots of this model, the Athenian democracy, the Judeo-Christian religion, and Roman law are located in the East, where the Islamic civilization was born too. 20th century Europe was a Europe of the nation states that emerged after World War I as a result of the 1848 revolution against the Austrian, Ottoman, and Russian empires. A process that started many energies, some generating progress, other conflicts. The expansion desire of some states, the dissatisfaction of some nations about the way borders have been crossed on their territory, the folly and ambition of some leaders to prove their superiority by occupying and annihilating other state independence led to the outbreak of regional wars and to world wars. But people's desire to live in peace could not be annihilated. On the contrary, the huge losses caused by the war to the defeated, but to winners too, generated an impulse for peaceful movement and brought about the desire to overcome disagreements through dialogue and good neighborhood treaties. The culture of peace is based on the relation between states, but also on the relation between peoples sharing common values born long before the current nation states. It is a good time for cultural diplomacy and for us to remember the legacy all the Levant left us. I believe that a great humanity conversation must now be encouraged, as for larger and larger groups of the regular people would develop a free flux of ideas and knowledge worldwide. Conflict prevention and managing the post-conflict situation in the contemporary world require a comprehensive, balanced vision, which would take into consideration the interests of various ethnic and religious communities, the state's duties and the natural rights of their citizens, the conjuncture of the long-term interests of the regional actors. This vision cannot be developed without the involvement of the representative able to utter the plurality of voices, questions, and desires of billions of people. Not understanding the other's motivation had led during history to many wrong decisions of foreign policy that triggered conflicts or wars. The common values policies as a dialogue basis can bring about the stability within the globalized 21st century world. The great popular movement for freedom, democracy, and human rights occurring nowadays in Northern Africa and the Middle East will change the face not only of these countries alone, but also of the entire world in the near future. What we are seeing here is a possibility of establishing a security and peace guarantee system based more on what we call the soft power. International politics, as well classic diplomacy, was built on power and force relation and will continue to be so a long time from now on. The concept of soft power is far from being functional. Cultural diplomacy is still at its dawns. I want to be well understood. I do not plead for replacing classic diplomacy with the cultural one. I would mean for me to encourage a dangerous utopia. But I stand up for associating them. From my experience gained as a scientist, as a man of culture, and as a statesman, I can say that cultural diplomacy is in the same report of the classic diplomacy as there are the non-Euclidean geometry with the Euclidean geometry, the relativistic physics with the Newtonian physics, the law of including middle with the law of excluding middle in the Aristotelian logic, the modernism and postmodernism with the classicism and neoclassicism in literature, music, and art. International organizations such as United Nations or UNESCO or the civil society try to create a political culture of security through negotiation and cooperation in order to promote peace and understanding throughout the world. We are looking for the lowest common denominator on which everybody can agree. My opinion is that we should plan for more. If we want to make a real peace and understanding between people, we must focus to identify not the lowest common denominator, but we should relate ourselves to the highest level denominator, faith. 20 years ago, people in Eastern Europe were ready to fight and to die from freedom and democracy. In the new millennium, let us rediscover faith. Not in order to use it like it happened during the long history of humanity against each other, but to understand our reason on earth. Peace is the name of God. Either we are Christian, Muslims, Jewish, or believers of Asian religions. Only man's arrogance made him forget the message of God, no matter how we call his name in our language or faith. Dear friends, if within the Levant area the cradle of the great monotheistic religions, a visionary political project will be achieved, a project adapted to the major challenges of the present, if he will contribute not only to create a new identity of this area, but also to create another concept of future world under the sign of new humanism. Maybe that after we, who have lived half a century under communist dictatorship, have seen that the project of the human face, communism, has definitely failed. It is a time for contemporary democracies to create the project of a human face capitalism. Thus, the new revolutions of the 21st century could be not only the freedom revolutions, but also a revolution of human dignity. Thanks for your attention.